Welcome into Shaping Reality. We almost forgot about you guys. We were talking. We were chatting. We're so glad that you're here. We're talking about life on planet Earth in May 2025. I'm joined by Penny Kelly. How are you, Penny?
I'm good. I'm very good. I hope everybody out there is good as well.
I hope so too. I
Yeah.
hope so too. I kind of have an overarching theme tonight, and I hope that you'll
With
be
it,
willing to go with me here. And okay, let me kind of explain. And you know what we're talking about is Penny's Look-See that she put out on, of course, I think it was on the 15th. And my perception when I listened to you and started thinking about what the things that you were saying, and Penny, where I kind of feel like we are now, and let us know over in the chat, you guys, if you feel something like this. I almost feel like we're in this in-between period
yeah.
where people have kind of caught on to some reality, some people, and we can talk about that topic in a few minutes.
Arr.
And it's like there's a part of me I can see where we're going. I can see we're maturing. So I feel like on the planet we're sort of this dorky, gangly 11, 12-year-old preteen
Right.
that is starting to recognize that their actions have consequences, or there's choices to be made and broader things to be thinking about. I kind of feel like that's where we're there. But it's sort of like, I feel like we're sort of in this waiting time to clean up the messes of the past. And we can get specific about those. And before we start moving into where I'm excited to go, which is things like free energy, and we're not killing each other anymore, and the soil's not being poisoned, that we're moving into a more mature period of a collective or of a civilization. Is that, based on your broader perspective, is there some validity to that? Is that kind of how you see it? And
Yeah.
what do you look around and think about?
Whoa, you don't want to know
Yeah, I
what I
do.
look around and see. But I agree with you. We have entered into this phase, and in the Look-See, I said it looks like a pretty quiet month. It's a lot of the same old, a lot of accusations, a lot of distrust, a lot of people there's a lot of people who never knew what was happening. There's a lot of people who have denied that what was happening did happen. There's some people that have awakened. There's some people that have not updated at all. And it's really at this point, it's just kind of like you said, it's a waiting. We're in a waiting pattern or a holding pattern, and we're probably going to move out of that over the summer. So you should enjoy this little moment of quiet. But we have awakened. Enough of us have awakened to be able to hold, I think, a space of common sense, a space of love, a space of of inquiry, a space of creative juice. What do we need to do here? And a space that demonstrates how we need to move ahead. And, a lot of people just kind of will gaggle along behind. That's the way the world works, and that's okay. But right now, there's this, there's so much that's happening behind the scenes, and so much that is being set up for the big changes that I think everybody's just kind of like, what are they doing out there? And there's huge changes coming around the financial system, huge changes coming around the government, the structure of our government, a whole bunch of things. So
Now, do you know these because you've psychically seen them? Do you know them because you know people who are working on them? How does this information come to you, and how could we better access that kind of broader perspective?
so I read and watch constantly, all the time. And then I read all kinds of stuff. It's all kinds of conflicting stuff. People that have this opinion over here on the right, people with that opinion on the left, people in that country, people in that province, people all over the planet. And then I go wash my socks and do my dishes. And while I'm busy doing stuff that has to be done, to stay decent, keep the house clean, etc., or I'm vacuuming or whatever, that then there's all kinds of gel that happens, gelling, and I all of a sudden I see something. I'll be thinking about something while I'm vacuuming, and all of a sudden I have this whole perspective where all the information kind of comes together, and what I see transcends the whole argument and ties it together. And so I think, oh, okay. And so then I drop the vacuum and I run and write that down. And then I go back to vacuuming. And so I have paper and pencil all over the whole house in case, I need to catch a thought very quickly or an awareness, because consciousness and intuition, very much like writing, you either grab it when it comes, or you stand the chance of losing it. And so there's a discipline that I've developed around writing, which is when you get that, you write that down. And you just keep putting it all in the same file. And then later you get all that whole file out and you look at all the stuff you wrote down and you see, well, what can I do with this? And as soon as you ask that question, it begins to organize itself into either a book or a video or a paper or something. So that's how I work. And then sometimes I have dreams. I'll give myself directions to have a dream about, XYZ. And then I have this dream. And last month I had a terrible, well, actually it was earlier this month, terrible dream about the whole child sex trafficking thing, and was like, oh my God, I was disturbed for days.
Okay. And I think didn't you mention that in the look-see?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
And I thought,
Ready,
well,
you guys.
what could possibly be worse than
Then what we know is happening?
Yeah.
Not taking any action.
Oh, well, that can't happen.
No, it can't.
That can't happen.
Yeah, because then we become complicit. Then we become, chickens that run and hide instead of saying, oh, wow, we can't have this and this can never happen again.
Yeah.
The numbers are overwhelming, the numbers of children that have disappeared or suffered. And, about a year and a half ago, I was invited to be part of a discussion with a group of probably 12 people that had escaped from the child sex trafficking thing that goes on. And there were men and women both. And I heard and learned some things that just made my hair stand on end. And yet it was clear that those people, those 12 or whatever there were, 15 maybe, there was a series of talks. And they were hosted by Max Lowen on her channel. And when I came away from that, again, I was disturbed for days. And I was so aware that those people, almost all of them, had come in specifically, gotten involved in that because they were seeing it for hundreds of years happening. And it was like they were saying, nope, this has got to stop. And I'm going to insert myself. I'm going to escape. And I'm going to tell the world.
Yeah.
Good. And wow.
Now, you have stated in the past that that whole thing, the whole child trafficking thing and ritual sacrifice, and is really an ET influence.
Some of it is because some ETs are well, they say we are, they're carnivorous. We limit, well, I would like to say we limit ourselves to animals, but can't really say that once you know the whole truth about what's been happening. That's not the case. And so it's very disturbing to have to contemplate that. But some ETs they push that. And that's ancient. The child thing has been happening since times of BC. It's a really bad, this whole, the Kali Yuga, this whole, what is it, 6,000 years or something like that, 4,000, 5,000. That whole thing has been happening with children for this whole yuga, this whole time.
But this is not specific to Earth.
No, it's not. However, if you want to become an advanced race, you have to stop that.
Yeah.
So it's not okay. And
yeah.
The less honorable ETs, they don't stop it. They promote it for their own purposes.
Because it breaks down the society.
Yeah, among other things. So
yeah, among other things. Yeah. When that is something that it's going to be a challenge for us to overcome that.
Yeah.
As
yeah, you were asking, how are we going to handle this? I don't know. I don't know how we're going to handle it without. I don't know.
I
almost
think
been afraid to look.
when I think about it, Penny, and maybe this is just my perception. I don't think that there's more than maybe 3 or 4% of the population that has any idea.
Oh, you think it's that low? Oh.
Well, I think, okay, so what I can honestly say is I think maybe 3 or 4% know the depth of it.
Okay.
And maybe a greater number thinks it's,
they hear the talk, but they don't take it very seriously.
Yeah, or this 16-year-old girls dating 50-year-old guy. In other words, it's more of a and I don't want to say lightly sexual thing because there's nothing about it is light.
Yeah.
But
right.
I don't think they have any idea of the depth of it. And my concern is that if it was exposed now and all the people in the government who are involved were exposed, it would be dismissed by so many as a political ploy.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that from that specific angle, but they're using, it's just a political ploy for everything nowadays. So you're probably right about that. However, I think, and this is just a gut thing. The other day, I was watching or listening to Pam Bondi talk about a few things around Epstein, and I thought the way she was wording her announcement, I thought she knows the terrible shock that this would be to the people of the U.S. and she's trying to figure out, this was just an intuition listening to her. She's trying to figure out, how do we tell the truth without destroying ourselves and our self-esteem and our credibility and how do we stay alive in the process? So I don't know that they have figured that out yet. But I have to give them credit for trying, and I think Kash Patel also said something in another video that was just this little side comment, and it was about we don't we're going through all this information and these videos and whatever, and we're trying to decide what has to be done in such a, or what can be released in such a way that it doesn't destroy us or wreck us, or I don't know the word he used, but whatever it was, I thought, oh, they're trying to mitigate the impact of that because it's so awful. So
Okay, so, and I think I saw that too, because I remember having a feeling like you just stated, like, oh,
okay,
they're trying to massage it. Which brings me kind of back to where I started in that, I feel like we're this gangly 11, 12-year-old
right,
just coming out of this goofy stage,
yep,
and we're just sort of realizing that there's greater responsibility ahead of us. Here's the dilemma I have. If we are not, if the population at large is
okay,
not brought in or read in or made aware of everything, then how are we supposed to grow up as a civilization? That it feels uncomfortable to me where, there's a part of me that understands there's a lot happening behind the scenes.
yep,
I
yeah,
understand that, and I understand the strategy behind it. But I
yeah,
also understand if you're going to have a fully mature, high functioning, creative, innovative collective of people, you can't be gatekeeping information. Everyone has to participate with their will, with their energy, with their consciousness. And so, and then the next thing I think, well, we're such a large collective compared to other collectives. If we
agree,
talk about, we're billions of people. There's some collectives that are a few thousand at this
right,
point.
yeah,
Does that figure into the dilemma that there's so many of us, and the range of education about what's happening on the planet is so broad?
yeah, yeah. And actually, YouTube, all the podcasts, Rumble, they're all participating in that range of education. But going back to the question of there's so many of us, the other day I was reading on, what's the name of it, Badlands Media. Did you ever read any of their stuff?
No, but it's so funny. I think I just recently heard about them. So,
Okay. They have some very good stuff and some very good writers. And they had taken a piece that somebody wrote, maybe in Substack, and he had just traveled to, I think it was Japan, Korea, maybe some other place over there in the Far East. And he was sharing his perspective and what it was like. And it was very well written. It was very, it was a reminder of how we used to be. He said it didn't matter where he went, whether it was anywhere in Japan or anywhere in Korea or anywhere, I don't know if it was Thailand or something like someplace else maybe. He said the skies were clear. There were no chemtrails. There were no populations. The Asian countries were not invaded by immigrants, illegal immigrants. None, none, absolutely none. He said the cities were immaculately clean. The people were not running around with purple and green hair and wearing these outrageous clothing. Everybody was kind, polite, thoughtful. It was well organized. He saw a 6-year-old getting off the bus, I guess, in the middle of a city with nobody around him. And he was instantly, oh, that child is all by himself, and realized how safe everybody felt their city was, that they would allow a 6-year-old to get on the bus and go across town, and get off all by himself and go wherever he was going to go. And nobody had to accompany him. That's how I grew up. We did not have to worry about people running off with our siblings or our friends. That just didn't even occur to us. And so it was a long piece. It was well written. And I thought, oh, wow. And he said in one of his comments that the populations were smaller and they had much more self-discipline and much more of a work ethic. And I thought, okay, we have fallen down somewhere along the line. I know that falling down process was on purpose. It was engineered.
We were pushed down.
Yeah, the propaganda, if all you ever have to read is tinged with a certain bias, you're going to pick that up. And that bias started way back, I'm going to say in the late 60s, after they successfully got rid of JFK. That's when it started. That's when I noticed the difference. And I was not even interested in political stuff hardly at all. I mean, I was aware and I had some deep insights way back when I was very young, but I could see the difference in the way things, all of a sudden, everybody was being focused to think about themselves, look at themselves, analyze themselves, what's wrong, and it became the rage. And I think for me, the epitome of that was realizing when the guys who sang Bridge Over Troubled Waters.
Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah. When Paul Simon had an interview, and I happened to read that, and he was talking about all the time he was spending on the psychiatrist's couch. And I thought, what are you doing? What? How do you have the time and the money for that? You know, figure yourself out. What is your problem, man? And then it was everybody was going to therapy for something, for one thing or another. And then the movies started coming out that highlighted these people are screwed up. They're screwed up sexually. They're screwed up financially. They're alcoholics. They're this, they're that, you know. So here's to you, Mrs. Robinson. That was another famous song.
Yeah.
I was like, what are they singing about? And then I saw that it was about some woman from a movie who was an alcoholic. And I thought, oh. And then, it just progressed from there. So, and I think when 1980 came along and the AIDS epidemic started, I knew instinctively there was something wrong with that whole thing. It became very political. It became a political football. And I thought, as ignorant as I was back then, I recognized that that something was happening to us. I wasn't sure what it was, but it just got worse and worse and worse. And it was only after Reagan was shot that I was really looking at, I had this insight that said, oh, the plan was to get rid of him and put George Bush in place. And they failed. And then George Bush became the president, and it went downhill 90 miles an hour from there forward. And even I could tell at that point. And I could see they were gutting the U.S., that they were gutting everybody in the process. All the companies were leaving. They were all going to China or Mexico or somewhere where it was cheaper labor. And so we went from having these wonderful incomes to having nothing. So many people, nothing. That's when homelessness started showing up. And I was, oh my God, we have homeless people here. This is not India. What are we doing? And so here we are. And we have a long road back.
Yeah, we do.
And I think, let me just say one closing thing. I think, I'm going back to the guy who wrote the article. We have to re-raise our children so that they don't end up like we are today, or like the people, like the kids behind us. They're struggling, and I have children that are in places of great responsibility. And they are saying, my God, we hire somebody, a millennial, they're unprofessional. They don't want to work. They want to come in whenever they feel like it. They don't care about the people they're working with. They don't care about the quality of the job. They are difficult to work with. They act like, they don't need us. And then they quit. They just don't show up one day. They just disappear. They get a few paychecks and they're gone. And over and over and over, and that's happening. And my daughter struggles to keep employees at the clinic that she works. My other daughter is, struggles to find people that are willing to work in her business. And so it's really, we're at a point of nobody wants to work, nobody gets it, nobody cares. That has to be turned around, and we have to reteach the younger ones behind us. And maybe they'll get it, some of them, enough of them. Maybe they won't. But we could certainly do something with the little children that are coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they are the ones who will build a new world.
Yeah, they are. I was at the market today, and a gal came in. Penny, she looked maybe around 17.
Okay.
She was heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Kids were not heavy when we were younger.
No. 74% overweight.
Yeah, this is the food supply. It's not, I'm not saying she's got a problem. It's the food supply. She's heavy. And she was wearing ripped jean shorts, and underneath them were stockings that were ripped to it almost looked like a spider web pattern up and down each leg.
Oh, wow.
And, a ripped shirt and stuff. And I looked at her and I realized that she had been socially conditioned to not go towards nice things.
Good. Yeah.
Nice things, a nice fabric, a nice cut. And, it's like she had been socially conditioned by this machine to put herself in a place to wear ripped clothes because that was cool. And I thought, we've got such a big problem.
Yeah, we do.
And I notice it even, in the millennials, and we're not picking on you millennials, if there's any millennials watching.
No.
But the difference in, I see millennials, and we're talking, these are 35 to 40, early 40 people. They're doing things right now that I was doing when I was 19.
I know.
In other words, the life steps. What I'm talking about is the life steps,
Right.
And
not on your own.
Barely doing them.
Yeah.
And are these are not stupid people. These are not, but they've been heavily vaccinated because of that time frame.
Yep.
They've been conditioned, and I see it. There's just not that drive.
Yeah.
And, Penny, there's a part of me that thinks, well, the world looked more exciting when I was 19 and 20 than it looks to people who are 19 and 20 now.
Yeah.
It's and maybe it's part of it is they have very little to look forward to.
I think that's true, but if they understood that it's their world, it's their world to create now, maybe they would get excited.
They think the boomers screwed it up for them.
Well, what can I say? I think the people who were guiding us definitely were screwing the boomers.
Yeah.
Boomers were hardworking.
Yes.
They had a work ethic. They were all about getting a job, showing up, taking care of it. I think about my parents who grew up during World War II and the deaths that were happening in that time. By the time my father came home from the war, all he wanted was quiet, little family, little house, little job, a few children. He loved us. And we represented life to him after seeing so much death and having to kill people. that the birth of each one of us was, for him, it was a huge celebration. And I don't see a lot of that excitement about birth. I think we're going to get to that point because there's so few people able to have babies as we move into the future. But I think, I just taught a class not this past weekend, but the weekend before. It's my master teacher class. It's for teachers who want to get outside of the public system and become a professional contract teacher. And I, there was quite a few people in the class, and I was listening to them, and I think we have hope that we are going to be able to change the education system. We have people that are saying, I want to teach my grandchildren, I want to teach my children. Then there's teachers and professors saying, I want to use these techniques, and I want outside the system. They want to build a new system. And I think that's part of, they're all people who love to work with children. And they're really quite inspired in their own right, and so just teaching this, how to use accelerative brain compatible teaching is kind of like organizes their excitement about working with children.
Yeah.
And their way of going about it. And that is a major vector in the change that is unfolding right now. A lot of schools are really having a hard time, and they continue to have a hard time. And a lot of teachers are leaving because the system is so bad. And so if we can at least change that, such that when you teach using these principles, these accelerated brain compatible themed based teaching techniques, you bring out the genius in children and you nurture that. And I think that that's one of the ways, a major vector. I think another major vector is that people are losing jobs. This is really kind of a heartbreaking vector. So they're home with their children. And what I'm seeing is they don't know what to do with those kids. They don't know how to interact with them. They're used to just, shuffling them off to this or that or whatever, getting them to school. There's a routine that everybody develops. But the really tight relationship that has to develop between parents and children, that has a chance when people are stuck at home, unless they're beating their kids and saying, I don't want to have to take care of you. But not many people do that. Hopefully, the majority love their kids, and people do love their kids. So I see this wonderful opportunity unfolding in that direction. And then there's, even though I see a lot of things that could go wrong around the whole Trump effort, that he's, the track he's on right now and what he's trying to do, if you look behind the curtain, you can see he's really trying to soften the financial blows that are coming. He's trying to organize us and set up a new financial system. And unfortunately, he likes CBDCs and Bitcoin and cryptos and all of that. Well, I shouldn't say unfortunately. It's only unfortunate regarding central bank digital currencies. If cryptos are left alone, that's a big option for a lot of people. But if he's able to help us get through, we have the responsibility of saying to him, of pushing back, hey, we don't want that. And we don't like that. And that doesn't look good. And that works now. But what about 40 years from now when you're not around and we don't have honorable people in place or we have to be looking ahead. That's a major vector for us. And if we can get to a place where we get through the changeover, I think we'll have some people that are looking up instead of bad-mouthing everything that's happening. And then the children that I think we're going to have so few children that they're going to become little treasures, and they'll be celebrated and taken well care of. And that, I often think, we're talking about the whole sex trafficking thing. I often think the punishment for that is going to be, you're not going to have any children. You're not going to have enough children to even keep yourselves going, your civilization going. And that's, we're going to end up doing what other people do, which is raising them in test tubes and things like that. But with great love and with an understanding of energy and consciousness and all of that. So we have some options, but those options are big changes for us. So.
Well, from my perspective, I see a couple of things happening. The first is that as far as the current administration,
Okay.
I primarily focus on what Trump is doing and RFK Jr. and then Cash and Dan.
Yep.
And what I see, and maybe I clearly am looking through my own lens, but what I see is strategy.
I do too.
Not the easiest, most obvious move,
no,
but the moves that are going to cut out the power base underneath those systems that need to go.
That's right.
There's so much pain. And people are barking and barking and barking. You're not doing this. You're not doing this. And I'm thinking, well, they're doing all the things that are going to take care of that.
Yeah.
Underneath it. So that's what I see. But then again, if it turns out that all these guys are, playing a game and they're not really have good intentions, I think that the people are going to push back. It's like people are screaming now if they don't like a choice of any of these people. People, and thankfully X, at least to some degree, we have some ability to say things.
Yeah.
Like I posted to Senator or to Speaker Mike Johnson, is that his name?
Yeah.
I said, you might want to contemplate what a pitchfork up your ass is going to feel like. And I thought, Kimberly, the FBI is going to show up at your door. But they didn't, and it's like, okay, now I have the freedom to say that.
Yeah. That's
which is nice. So getting back to, I want to circle back around to hearing the truth. Like we're looking at open ET contact within the next 24 months. And I'm hearing that from a lot of people. I think I've heard something similar from you as well.
Yeah. I have gone to look. The position they have is not good right now, but.
What do you mean?
They do not want to intervene in a situation that is so loaded with frustration, with anger, with distrust. And they don't like that, number one. Number two, that's for us to resolve, not them. And they don't want to be a distraction. So just recently, even though I didn't get a big message, when I was asking them, are you guys showing up?
When are you coming for dinner?
Yeah. The answer was not at this time. That was it. Not at this time. And so it wasn't a denial that they would ever show up. It wasn't, there was no recriminations or anything, but that whole sense of not at this time, along with it came when you're communicating telepathically, you get a whole bunch of information. And that was part of it, was the, the amount of anger, the amount of distrust that we had. They said when things, the implication was that when things settled down, they would still be here. And so
But aren't there some ETs that are working with different governments around the world and have been for quite some time?
Yeah, there are. Yeah, but they those are very limited. Okay, and they have wanted, and so let me say it this way: a lot of governments, and actually this applies to maybe the whole conversation about people screaming at Trump or at at Robert Kennedy or Musk or any of those guys. The screaming it's directed at a single individual, as if that single individual was doing everything. When you get to be the president of a country, by God, you have to trust a lot of people. You have to put a lot of people in places and hope to God that what you said to them is going to resonate and they're going to do their best. And that isn't always the case. And when you get a military that is split and has been split, and you get a Congress that has been split, and you get leaders and businessmen that have been split, they don't care what's happening in the country. They just care about what they want, which is usually selfish. They build their little kingdoms and they do stuff on their own, and they cover it with plausible deniability. And so, there's people still shooting down ET craft. That is not okay with ETs. And even though they have astounding deflection, I don't know what to call it, deflection capacities, ability to cloak themselves, they still get caught out in the open. And the government has a whole bunch of their craft and their bodies that they have, that they've used to engineer what I hope will be a future for us that allows us to get off the planet and move among at least the solar system, at least. And so we're at a place where ETs are like,
Little volatile down there.
Yeah, hands off right now. So
okay, so that kind of circles us back to what we were talking about before we were chatting before we came on.
Yeah.
About, I have this experience. I think everybody watching this has had this experience. Put it over in the chat if you haven't. I don't think anybody's going to say they haven't. That their understanding of what's going on the planet is so different than some people they talk to. And I had shared with Penny earlier that I saw a post on X. A woman said, I spent the weekend with a group of couples, all of them master's degrees and above, well-educated people.
Mm-hmm.
She said they had absolutely no clue about what was going on the planet. And anytime she would bring up anything outside of the mainstream narrative, they would look at it just, this blank stare, like, what are you talking about? So that to me, we don't have a shared reality. We don't have a homogeneous understanding
of
who we are, what's going on, where we need to go, who we need to trust.
Right.
And bringing it back to that article you were talking about, that Asian cultures, I think, are more homogenous.
Much more.
There's more of a shared reality. So we're in this place. And I had an exchange with a girlfriend a few weeks ago, and she was calling RFK Jr. a quack.
Wow.
And in some other word, and I knew that she had listened to the mainstream media because it was whatever word they're using to discredit him. It's like crackpot or something like that. And anybody who uses that word, I know they're just listening to the MSN and they have no clue what they're talking about.
I know.
And so she was calling him a crackpot, and I happen to know a lot about the childhood vaccine schedule just because I'm interested in it.
Yeah.
And I kind of spouted off some things. Is like this, RFK Jr., whether you like him or not, knows more than
Yeah.
almost anybody on the planet about vaccines, what happens with vaccines, what's in vaccines, the adjuvants. And I mean, he's well read in.
Well, he is.
And you want to talk about an expert in the field? He's the definition of the expert in the field. Even
I
he doesn't
know.
have a medical degree. He's a brilliant attorney. And so I laid out all these facts to her, and she came back with a smart ass remark, like,
Oh,
oh, well, so how are you? Or, just, and what I realized is that there are people walking around with really strong opinions who have absolutely no foundation for them.
I know.
No basis other than somebody said it and they adopted it. So my point is that when you have billions of people that have such a wide range of belief systems about how to move forward, I mean, if I was an ET, I wouldn't want to stick my toe in here either. This does not look like fun.
Okay. Yeah.
I'd rather go to a planet with nice beaches and hang out there than jump into that pool of humanity on Earth.
I know. Oh my
Based on your experience, like, how do we?
Well, let me make a comment on one thing, and this has to do with Robert Kennedy. It's a little story about Dr. Levengood. Okay, so he learned, and for those who don't know, he went to U of M and went all the way through the PhD program, wrote his paper, his thesis, and he had a person on his committee who didn't like him at all and was in the chemistry department, not the physics department. And this guy had been trying to figure out something for years and years, and had all his students work on it. Nobody had been able to figure it out. And it was some chemical thing about how many millimoles of this stuff go through this plant at such in a certain space of time. And so Levengood was defending his thesis. He was right at the end after going through all this stuff. He was a brilliant man. He was well known for how well he could develop different, like research projects and experiments that would verify this, that, or whatever. And he had a problem with being mute when he got really upset. If he moved into fight or flight mode, he would lose his ability to speak. And they used to call that being tongue-tied back when I was a kid. But anyway, so this guy didn't like him and was challenging him left and right. And then said, you're not going to get your PhD. I'm not going to vote for you to get your degree, your PhD paper, unless you figure out this problem. And the guy who gave him the problem knew that nobody had been able to figure this out for years. So Levengood took that problem home. He said he lost 20, 30 pounds over the next month trying to figure this thing out. Finally did figure it out. Went back all excited, and the guy went on the attack. He was so jealous. He was recognizing that Levengood would have to take credit for this now. And so Levengood never got his formal paper, but he had all the knowledge and he had all of the experience, and he continued to work in the field and develop and write papers. And I forget how many papers he wrote, 40 different papers in some of the biggest scientific journals in the whole world. And he got invited to speak in Washington, D.C. at a big conference. And so he's reading the fine print in this invitation, and it says PhD or above. And so he wrote back and said, I'm sorry, I can't, I have to decline. I don't have a PhD. And they wrote back and said, who are you trying to kid? And they said you don't have to have the paper, you need to have the knowledge. It's PhD or above, and the above was the knowledge that you had gained. They said that is more than the equivalent of the PhD. And I think Robert Kennedy is in that same position. He has been eating, sleeping, thinking, worrying, working, lawyering for years on this whole vaccine issue. And he is more than a PhD. He's equivalent or above at this point with that whole medical issue and what goes on. And I think people, we're at this stage in our development of the gangly teenagers, where we are going to move away from these certified experts because they have so betrayed us. And the people who have knowledge and are willing to speak are going to be recognized as the people who are really needing to be listened to if you want to understand what's going on. And there's a whole bunch of people in that category, not just with vaccines, but finance, governance, all kinds of stuff. So I feel like we're coming to this place where going back around, circling back around to the people in the group who really had no clue what was happening. And you said they're in a different reality. That is exactly where we're at. We're moving into a different dimension on a different timeline, and it's becoming glaringly obvious to so many people that, wow, they don't think like I do at all. And they live in a different world. And that, I think, is going to accelerate and be exaggerated to the point that we don't even understand what they're doing, how they're doing, why they're doing. They're going to live and die and be reborn, and live and die and be reborn in that level of awareness. And we are moving elsewhere. And we don't really have a whole lot of experience with that new world, that new timeline. But we know we don't want that one over there. And so I think that's really why it's so blatant that some people are in a different world and they have no concept of what happens. And just recently I was listening to somebody that had a real religious thing, and they were talking about the rapture, that kind of thing. And we've talked about that a little bit before in previous conversations. And I was all of a sudden again seeing that the quote rapture or the harvest or whatever you want to call it is really the people that have evolved past that third dimensional level of thinking, that violence, that kind of medicine, that kind of governance, that kind of child raising, that kind of everything, religion, art, science, music, business, technology, all that is it's kind of like a foundation, but we're moving over here to a world where we can take that science and use it in a way that's entirely good. That's a fourth dimensional kind of decision. Yeah. And the decisions for 4D will be a little one here and a little one there, and they're not going to be organized and cohesive at first, but over time they will become that. And so, I look forward, try to look forward, and not get caught up in the people that are screaming. And they, if they think that we don't see, the fact of the matter is that they don't see. They don't see us. They don't, they're not deeper than an inch. And they just want to scream. So,
yeah.
Like, okay.
I think last month, and I don't know if it was when we were on air or before or after, but you had brought up the children that were learning blindfolded.
Yeah, Right.
that were reading blindfolded and riding bikes blindfolded and
Playing tennis.
playing tennis. And it fascinated me, and I started looking into it.
Oh,
It's wonderful. It's so fast. It's so interesting. You guys, if you haven't, you can go on Instagram and look it up. I mean, it's becoming a thing out there.
that's good.
And what got me so excited, and thank you for bringing that up, what got me so excited about that is those children are learning at such a young age to trust their intuition
Yeah.
and to believe in themselves. And where I took that is, oh my gosh, you guys, that's the turning point. Because those children, you will, as they grow older, you will never be able to say to them, safe and effective. They're not going to buy it.
That's right.
These children are so connected to the truth
Mhm.
and to their ability to discern. And when you look back, particularly people, maybe the boomers, born in the 50s, 60s, we have been trained all our lives to ignore what we feel and do what we're supposed to do.
That's right.
And that is why, in my opinion, so many people fell for safe and effective. Because we lost that connection to our center, which is what you teach, Penny. That's the whole basis of what you do.
Yeah, that's true.
So, that's exciting to me, because that generation, I almost feel like people my age, we're just hanging out here holding space until those kids. Can you imagine coming in,
Wow.
as one of those children? What an exciting adventure.
I know. Oh my gosh. And you know what excites me is I want to last long enough to be able to guide some of those, because when they get to be teens, one of the things I've seen is they're using their power in some ways that you need to say, no, don't be
Like
doing
a teenager.
Yeah, right. But they're really much more sensitive. Maybe, the majority of them are just going to understand, and they're not going to be as wild and rebellious. That rebellion grew out of that whole training. Just do what you're told and don't pay attention to what your own self is telling you. Don't listen to that, listen to this, that kind of thing. And maybe they won't have that big rebellion as badly as we do, but they still will have to have their ethics reinforced and their manners polished. And so, I hope that those of us who are awake will be around and can help to guide that. So,
Well, I think about, imagine, I have this fantasy. This is of the earth being this just jewel
oh,
of
it is.
and when we get it together,
Yeah.
not only an incredibly beautiful planet, but a planet of creation and creativity and innovation
Yes.
and joy and nurturing, when all our energy and focus is growing and learning and polishing us up as jewels, instead of throwing money away on wars and poisons and blah 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 blah, all the energy wasted. Our communities are beautiful and safe. Like, we become this really respected planet.
I agree. Yeah.
Doesn't that
We're
sound exciting?
Yeah, it does. And I think the excitement for me is that when we become that, we will be welcomed into other communities of much more advanced beings, and we'll have some people to guide us and show us, well, did you think about doing it this way? Did you think about creating that? Things like that will be unfolding. So just recently, somebody was saying something about the energy of the future And whatever it was, I can't remember. I just remember thinking, no, that's not correct at all. It's plasma. Plasma energy is the future of the basis of all of our science, our machines, our technology, our manufacturing, our heat and air conditioning, the way we grow our food. It's the basis of everything. It's a whole different kind of science. And that, the person who was saying whatever he was saying was very knowledgeable. But I thought that's, and I see this a lot. People take a concept that we have now and they just extrapolate. They don't really understand that there's a leap there, that you have to jump over this gap. There's a new understanding, and there's a lot of research that needs to be done. We could have a whole group of budding scientists that would be discovering all kinds of goodies and building. One of the questions I get all the time, and I think you might have even asked, let me see. Let's see. Well, you didn't really ask it the way I was thinking that you did. What will the communities of the future look like? We don't really know. I've seen, in the future that we're in much smaller groups, much smaller. But I guess the thing that really is critical is that I see and hear a lot of people saying, where's my community? Where's my group? We're not there yet. It has to come apart. And then people will come together with no reservations. And people are trying to get ahead of the curve, and I don't blame them. I am too, so is everybody I know. But we can't have those communities of the future in full operation until there are no other alternatives. And that's a hard place to be recognizing. It's like, no, I don't want that. And I think that's why we lose quite a few people along the way. They give up. They don't go investigating. They don't go exploring. So we need to become explorers of a whole new world.
Well, before we close, I want to touch on what you were saying before we went live.
Oh, okay.
And because I think it's important, and I think it's almost the crux of this kind of in-between stage that I feel like we're in.
Yeah.
And you were saying that so many people have strong opinions and are arguing because they want to take a side, because they want to go back and sit on the couch.
Right.
And not do anything and watch, I don't know, Wheel of Fortune. I don't know what people watch.
I don't either.
TV.
Yeah, right.
And I think that is true. People don't want to be engaged. Just like that conversation I was having with the girlfriend who was calling RFK a crackpot. I can't think of anybody who's less of a crackpot.
No.
But she didn't want humans, or at least Americans, are kind of innately lazy and they don't understand that, no, you have to stay involved in this process.
Right.
Always. If you're physical on this planet, you need to be involved in the process of this planet.
That's right.
It's not checking out all the time.
No. Back in the early days of the colonists, I'm not sure if the United States had had the war against England or not yet, but they had these gathering places called chautauquas all over the place. Every area had a chautauqua, and it was, I don't know if it was an Indian word or where that word came from, or a French word, but it was a place where people gathered every few weeks, maybe every month, and they brought a potluck dinner and their kids, and they ate and talked about what kind of of world, what kind of government, what did they not want to bring from whatever country they came from to this new world? They were coming here to get away from the craziness and the corruption and the death and the sickness and the decadence that had overcome Europe back in those days. And that the tradition of the Chautauqua, Chautauqua, Chatauqua, that was an established thing, and everybody participated. And I think, when I was thinking about that, we might have to do something similar, and maybe we can do some of that online, maybe not. But we're not going to have a new world if we don't get together and say, well, I don't want this and I want that and I want to make sure, and and blah, 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 blah. We have to come together. You can't just sit on the couch and watch and wait for some leader to come along and say, okay, go here, do this. That's the same thing we have now. And that is not going to work. So we're at this turning point where the people looking for community really need to start talking with one another, making little groups, little gatherings. There's several of the groups that have formed just from my students, some about medicine, some about money, some about teaching and education. I don't know if anybody's talking about governance at this point, but all of those topics have to become part of our conversation, and where we say what we want and what we don't want. Period. If we don't do that, we're just going to go down when the whole ship goes down. And we're really close to the point that they're going to take it down on purpose. And it's in those moments of kind of chaos that we have an opportunity to say yes, no, maybe, let's try it, etc. But you can't make one decision that lasts for the rest of your life and you say, oh yeah, that, I don't have to bother with that anymore. That isn't the way it works. So that's how we got to where we're at.
Yeah, it is how we got to where, and I think that realization is the maturing process.
Yeah, it is.
That you don't vote in 1964 and then decide, okay, I'm done.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And you don't make a final decision about leaders that have stepped in. We have leaders that have stepped in now. And those, they're obvious, but they're being tested too, just like us. Mm-hmm. They might not be able to pull it off. The savioring, if I can use a word that, people use all the time. Well, I'm looking for a savior. I'm like, wow, what?
Well, you know what? I feel like, Penny, if they don't succeed, we're going to succeed. I just feel like there's too many people are just like,
yeah, we'll hold it together and new leaders will appear. And I've said many times, that whole group that's in Washington, those are transition leaders. We are transitioning to something new and different. And it's vastly different. And, I'm looking at the United States of North America and thinking, yeah, it looks like they're going to pull that off. And we have an opportunity, if they do, for most of us to survive, to make it, and to be fairly comfortable. So, we don't have to listen to Deagle, who says, the population of the U.S. is going to drop to whatever it was, some ridiculous number of people, low. We had lost like 75% of the people. We don't need to have that. We can say no. So,
okay. I have a question, and then I want to close with a joke.
Okay. All right. Good.
So would you come back to Earth?
Oh, yeah, I would. Yeah, because Earth is not done. We're not done with Earth. If we, I'm not saying I'll come back to 3D, but I would come back to Earth, maybe at several levels, if I could, and just see, you know, can I be of service? If there's no need, I wouldn't bother. But if there was a need, yeah, I would.
Would you prefer to come in as a new body or just make this one last like 80 years longer?
I don't know. I used to say, well, I'm here till I'm 147, but I heard somebody else say that recently. I thought, where'd you get that number? That was my number. So, um, but you know, as I get really close to 80 now, I'm like, wow, this is getting harder and harder to maintain, you know, all my energy, not so much my energy. I don't have any problem with that, but physically it's like, oh wow, you know, you can't drop out for a day or God forbid a week or you're going to be bedridden. So so I pay close attention, take good care of myself. I'll last as long as I last. I don't worry about it anymore, but it would be wonderful to come back as one of the new kids with all those abilities that are accepted by the whole population.
And you know, the planet's really toxic right now. So I think it's hard to have a
Yeah.
body in the middle of all this toxicity.
Yeah.
You got it. I mean, I take more supplements than food.
I know. It's gotten to a ridiculous point.
It
And
is ridiculous. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to close with the joke, and it's
All right.
really crass, you guys.
Okay. A fair warning.
Okay, so the news is that Joe Biden has cancer.
Oh, I saw that. I'm like, oh,
So
they're going to take him out.
here's my position. Joe Biden died a long time ago,
I know.
and I'm thinking that they're tired of paying the double.
Yeah, you're right.
And so they decided they're going to take him out with cancer, so they don't have to pay that son of a bitch anymore to pretend to be Joe Biden.
Excuse me. Oh my God. Yeah, I shouldn't laugh, but I can't help it.
You know what? I
Oh,
look at people. I'm thinking,
yeah,
do you guys really believe that?
a lot of people do.
They do.
Yeah,
People with I thought were kind of, aware.
yeah, I know. There's, there's a lot of criticism about Trump said this and Trump said that. He has doubles too. They all have doubles. So, yeah, Biden will have a nice funeral and everybody will say nice things, and that'll be the end of Biden. So, oh
That
my.
poor guy's gonna have to get another job.
Yeah, right. Oh my. Well, evidently impersonation pays pretty well. So,
Well, I would imagine the silence is what they're paying for.
oh, oh.
You
You know,
know,
I have a saying, you know, lay down with dogs, get up with fleas. Lay down with government, you don't get up at all, you're dead. So,
I'm gonna steal that. That's a good one.
well, everybody that ends up working with the government doing some kind of dirty job ends up being taken out so they can't talk. It's
Yeah,
like,
Hillary calls the suicide hotline on you.
yeah, I know. Oh my.
Oh gosh. Well,
Yeah.
it's an entertaining adventure here on Earth right now.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Yeah. We have a quiet moment. We have a quiet month, kind of quiet.
Do you think the summer's gonna get a little wonky?
I do. I see it build slowly over the summer. And people just, they're like ranting. I'm like, what are they ranting about? It looked to me like they're ranting about everything. But
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of things that have to do with Ukraine, with Israel, with finances, and a couple other issues, but those are the main ones. And a little bit with China. So they're setting up, I think they're setting up the financial framework for our future. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I just, I go back to that, I wish we would be read in. I don't
I
like
know.
this management, let's manage the people. I'm over that,
Yeah. Yeah. And that actually brings me to one of the points that I've often tried to make with people. The guys that are in power right now grew up at the same time we did. Their vision, their goal might not be a new world. It might be, let's fix this. And so we've got something that works that we're all comfortable with. Um, and so that's why I think they're transition people. They're going to help us get through the mess and set up something new, but then they're not going to be appropriate for that new thing that they just helped set up. People are going to take off with that in a way that they didn't expect, and we will
Yeah.
have new leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
any last words before we toddle off into the month of June?
just try to enjoy this next maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks while it's quiet. You know, uh, if you got a wedding coming, go to it. If you got a graduation, go to it. If you got, something happening that a vacation, whatever, this is a good time to just kind of take care of business at home, etc. Gets a little more um, spicy come late June, July. Okay. So, yeah, be good to yourself. That's the message.
Take
Okay.
care of yourself first.
Yes, absolutely. I think, when I do think about it, that is something that is really, that's a permission that we just can't give enough. Take care of yourself first. So, doesn't mean take care of yourself selfishly. It's take care of yourself first and then do what you can.
Yeah, that's how you can be the greatest help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
So let's
thank you,
get
Penny.
started. Okay.
And thanks everyone for joining us. It's always so nice to check in with you and move
Yeah,
us all along in this exciting journey.
it is. It is. Yeah. Be well, you guys. Be
Okay.
well.
We'll see
Okay.
you next month. You have to push the button, Penny.
Okay.